The Cardinals grab a game in Philly before leaving town. And would you believe me if I told you the Cardinals are currently in a playoff spot? Well, it's true, and it's all coming up on B-Schaeff Daily. What's going on, everyone, and welcome in to this edition of B-Schaeff Daily. Brenden Schaeffer here with you. It is Sunday evening, June 2nd, 2024. Cardinals beating the Phillies on Sunday Night Baseball, getting out of town without being swept. And not only that, but by virtue of the Cardinals taking just one game out of three against the Phillies, your St. Louis Cardinals are now in a playoff spot. No, I know it's true. It's true. It is. It's very exciting. Everybody simmer down. Simmer down. It is true. The Cardinals in a playoff spot right now. Okay, everybody, relax. They're still below 500, though. 28-29 is the current record for the Cardinals, but it's also good enough for the third wildcard spot. Currently in the National League standings, as the Redbirds are a half game up on the Cubs and a half game up on the Giants for that third wildcard spot. As they go to sleepy sleep on Sunday night, they'll wake up Monday morning the same way. Not bad for a series that you didn't win, right? To go into Philly against the team that's playing like the best team in baseball. They had the best record in baseball going into today. I think the Yankees won, and they have been winning. Winners of 5 straight are the Yankees, so they are a little bit above the Phillies at this point, half game up for the best record in baseball, but still the best record in the National League, and just a really, really dynamic team. So for the Cardinals to go to their place, drop the first 2 games, you lose the Sonny Gray game, which doesn't feel good because that's the one guy that when he pitches, you really feel like you've got a good chance to win. So you lose that one, and this thing could have absolutely tilted in the other direction. Some people didn't like it, that yesterday on B-Schaeff Daily, my premise was, hey, Cardinals fans, are you worried that this is another backslide as the team sort of slides back, a couple of losses in a row, or is it more about the Phillies just being really good and it doesn't concern you that the Cardinals lost the first 2 games of this series and were potentially staring down the barrel of being swept out of Philadelphia and having to continue the road trip without very much momentum going into Houston? I was genuinely curious what the perspective would be from Cardinal fans, and it was a pretty split vote. Some people were upset even by my asking whether this was something you could consider a backslide. Others said the Phillies are good, but others said it's both. The Cardinals aren't on their level, and this was to be expected, but it is somewhat of a concern. But when you win the third one, and doing it the way the Cardinals did in extra innings, 5-4, on the National Game of the Week, Sunday Night Baseball, that makes it even a little bit more exciting. But just by virtue of the W, you're in very good shape heading out of town, going to Houston. It's a happy flight and a situation that you don't have to be thinking about, oh boy, we had this great run back to a 500 record, and then we immediately squandered it by losing 3 in a row, and now we're going to have to dig out of that hole. Like, that's not the situation the Cardinals are in. They're still a game below 500, but it just feels drastically different, to me anyway. And let me know if you're out there in Cardinals land and you disagree or you agree with my thought on this. You're 28-29. Man, that's such a more comfortable position to be than 3 games under. And it's really one play could have swung it in the other direction as Ryan Helsley comes out to get his 19th save of the season. That, by the way, is tops in Major League Baseball, passing Emmanuel Clase, who's at 18 for the Guardians. So Helsley's been having a heck of a season. We'll talk about his night and how it still didn't really include much in the way of the fastball. We'll talk about the split for him and how it's just not really reflective of what we normally see from Helsley and how that is a trend that is continuing. We'll talk about Lynn and the start that he had. He was done in by the error tonight. And by error, I mean plural. Cardinals made 3 of them, and Lynn paid for each and every one. So he left the game a little bit early, but how did we evaluate the outing for Lynn? Matthew Liberatore came in with some nice relief work. We'll talk about him. We'll talk about an offense that got a couple of 2-run homers, as well as their only hit with runners in scoring position at the exact time of the game that you would have liked to get it. And Nolan Gorman coming up big for this Cardinals offense. That's what we've got cooking tonight on B-Schaeff Daily. And if you like daily St. Louis Cardinals videos and podcasts, would love to have you subscribe to my channel as I continue to build it up here. Brenden Schaeffer, St. Louis Cardinals writer for KMOV. Cardinals Talk is what we do on this channel. Hit that button below the video screen, or if you're watching on a laptop, it's in the lower right-hand corner. You can click and subscribe just like that. Make sure to hit the bell for notifications as well. And I want to shout out the B-Schaeff Daily gang. If you'd like to check out a channel membership, support me in that way, the link is below in the description. And Jen is one of my great channel members, and she sent me a DM on Twitter tonight of her just doing some graphic design and put out a nice little logo. So you see that in the bottom left corner of your screen on the picture that is the backdrop for this audio podcast. I was really appreciative of Jen just doing that. She just felt like doing it, and I felt like putting it on. So appreciate Jen for doing that. If you want to join, though, the membership with Jen and a number of other Cardinals fans, you can do so. The link is right there in the description. Thank y'all, though, for listening. Let's talk some Cardinals as they beat the Phillies tonight 5-4, getting that key win to avoid the sweep. It just feels different, doesn't it? You lose 3 in a row. Oh, boy. You know that the Phillies are good, so you're going to be inclined to not feel too down and out about it, but it's really hard not to feel down and out if you're swept. No matter who you're playing, that's not going to be something that feels good. So the fact that the Cardinals were able to avoid that is a pretty favorable outcome. One of 3 you can take. I don't know if that's going to be the sentiment out there, but I think when I tweeted that tonight, a lot of people said, yes, just getting the 1. You can kind of relax. Everybody can breathe a little bit and maybe go into Houston with a bit of a chip on your shoulder, because the Astros have not been playing great baseball on the whole this season. Check out where they are right now in the standings. They're 3rd in the AL West, and they're 4-6 in their last 10. They had mounted a bit of a charge to try and make it closer to 500, but they're 8 games below right now. They've got a worse record than the Cardinals. They're 26-34, and it has just not been good for them, home or away. They've got a sub-500 record at home, and it's even been a little bit worse than that on the road for Houston. So, Houston, you've got a problem, and it very well could be the St. Louis Cardinals coming into town feeling a little bit better about themselves after they were able to salvage one of the games out in Philadelphia. And the way that they were able to do it tonight was behind some good offensive production from a couple of key lefty bats in that St. Louis lineup. What do you think about Alec Burleson batting in the 2-hole for the Cardinals? He had a home run tonight. It was the only hit he had in a 1-for-5 game. But he got one, and Nolan Gorman got one. Gorman was the offensive hero of the night for the Cardinals as he got it going in the first inning with a home run that I swear had like a 90-degree, all right, fine, maybe 85-degree launch angle. Just hit it straight up into the air, and it sailed out to right field. They had to replay review it, but it was another one of those darn crew chief challenges where the way it works is typically, hey, you're the other team, you don't like a call, you challenge it, right? And you use up your challenge in so doing. But this was one, and look, I get it. It's all about getting the call right, and ultimately that is what you want. So if the umps say, hey, we really didn't have a great idea of it, we called it this way on the field, but we're going to go take a look, and if it's something as simple as fair foul on a home run, you just got to get that right. So I think there's some precedent for that where, like, they were having the issue with David Bell, I think it was, in the Reds earlier in the week, last week, whenever that was. Yeah, that was earlier this week. Time does fly. When I believe the problem with that one was they ultimately rejected the crew chief review, I believe. They were mentioning on the radio broadcast the next day. I didn't see a lot of chatter about this on social media or anything, but I think they rejected it, but we didn't know that in the public because the umpires never tell anybody what they're doing. You've got to mic up the umpires in the same way that they do in the National Football League, college football. The refs have microphones on. NBA does a great job of this. They go to the scorer's table and they tell the broadcast what's going on so people at home can know. And hell, if you're in the ballpark, you're even more confused because you don't even have the commentators in your ear trying to at least guess at what's going on. You're just generally watching and going, I don't know. But I think that's what happened is they turned down the request of a crew chief review and basically said to David Bell he would have had to challenge both elements of a play at once or something to that effect. This was a situation where crew chief review, like, okay, it's a home run, fair foul. You do want to get it right. And in fairness, they did ultimately allow the same thing for Mason Wynn's long fly ball down the left field line later in the game, which was ultimately ruled foul. And that was the correct call, too, by the way. It wasn't until the last slowed down angle on ESPN for Mason Wynn's that you could see very clearly, at least for me. It took until the very last angle they showed, or the last, like when they slowed it down frame by frame, that I could see the little bitty whites of the baseball cross in front of the foul pole, which means it didn't go behind it or over the top of it as I thought at first it may have done. The ball doesn't, at first you might have thought, and several people did, oh, the ball disappeared behind the pole, which means fair ball. But if you watch it closely, that slow down angle, I promise you will see that it did cross in front, which means it was foul by probably a number of feet. But those down the left field line are always tricky. It's like an optical illusion. You can't ever seem to tell. But they gave Mason Wynn's the crew chief review treatment as they did Gorman's, but they were trying to overturn Gorman's by doing it because they did call it a home run on the field. But it was just umpires doing the due diligence, and as long as those don't take terribly long, I think ultimately that's fine. Don't have to raise too big of a stink about it, and fair is fair. They gave a long look to Mason's as well later on. So nothing improper, I think, going on in that situation. But Gorman, he gets the Cardinals on the board, and in the third inning, Alec Burleson uncorked on one, man. That was an absolute just rocket out to right field. And I kind of like the Philly fans booing Taijuan Walker, though they also booed Burley in subsequent at-bats in the game, true to Philly fan form. Guy homers off you, you're booing him the rest of the way. But I did think they were probably booing Taijuan Walker. And the reason I think that, coloring my thoughts, is that yesterday on YouTube, which click that subscribe button, shameless plug as always. So there was a Philly fan that commented and said, hey, you guys, Cardinals should be able to beat up on Taijuan Walker. If you don't beat him, you've got a problem. Which I was like, I didn't realize that people disliked him that much. But if you look at his numbers, he's got an ERA over 5. And, Philly fans are used to watching Aaron Nola go out there and Zach Wheeler go out there. And Ranger Suarez is having a heck of a season. So he's kind of the odd man out, I guess, of the group that's not performing as well. But it was fun that they booed him, and the Cardinals got things going with that offense early on. There were some defensive plays that were not the most crisp tonight. Cardinals made 3 errors, and I'll talk about that 5th inning in particular, where a couple of the errors came on basically Philly just daring Lance Lynn and Navan Herrera to do something about the bunts that they were putting out on the field. And I'll tell you my thoughts on that, whether I think that was, because with Lance Lynn, that's always going to be a topic of conversation. He'll cuss somebody out. He doesn't like it when you bunt. I'll talk about my thoughts on that in a minute. I want to get, though, first to a couple of plays by Mason Wynn. In the first inning, I believe it was, there was an opportunity to try and tag out Bryson Stott, who was stealing second base, and Wynn actually got him on the foot with the tag. It was one of those where the throw sails up the first base side, and Wynn's got to go toward his glove side to field it, but it was really smooth. Just one fell swoop, one motion, catches it, and then dips the glove behind his back, essentially, to tag the runner on the foot. And he got Stott before his hand was into the base. The problem was Wynn dropped the ball in the completing the process of slapping the tag on the foot. He just wasn't able to hold it in the glove. That's a moment that I noticed, and when it happened, thinking, man, that would have been an out. Ultimately, didn't make a difference. The Phillies didn't score in that inning. But something I noticed there, and then Wynn on the error in the second inning, I think that was just a little careless. He's trying to make the spectacular play, and I've said over and over, when these situations come up for Mason Wynn, I don't mind it generally because I know the types of plays he's capable of making. That was a little more, you'd like the fundamental, you'd like the routine play to be made first, though. Rather than make sure you have a shot at the supreme double play, got to make sure you get that first out at second base. It's a little thing. It's a fundamental thing. But I also know that a guy like Wynn, who's capable of doing so much, is at times going to take a little bit of an extra risk because in his mind, he's got the ability to do the fundamental thing in the process of going for the greater thing. But that was one where, you put the cart before the horse a little bit, had to step on second base while he was still possessing the ball. He tried to transfer as he was stepping on the base because he knows it's going to be a bang-bang play at first, so he's trying his darndest to get both outs. Unfortunately, in so doing, he didn't get either out. The ball on the transfer bobbled a little bit, and normally that's not a problem, but he actually hadn't stepped on the bag yet. His feet were just a little bit behind what you normally would see of the throwing motion and the process on a play like that. So they review it to ensure that he was not on the base because I do believe they called him safe initially, or pardon me, they called him out initially, and they needed to replay it to say, no, he was not on that bag when the ball came out. So the transfer play doesn't apply there because he just wasn't stepped on the base before he had transferred the ball to his throwing hand. So that puts Lance Lynn in a bit of a jam. It comes back to haunt him. Garrett Stubbs with the RBI double. Michael Ciani, though, made again, you want to talk about some of the negatives defensively, as we're doing right now. We're kind of going through it. I'll mention the positives, too. Michael Ciani, cutting that ball off in right center on the Stubbs double, it saves a run for the moment. The run did eventually come around to score on the ground ball to win a little later on in the inning with one out. They had the infield back. I don't mind that because I think infield in those spots is how a routine ground out to short ends up turning into another base hit, and suddenly the pitcher's in his head. He's had to get 5 outs to get out of the inning, and things can spiral on you. I know you conceded the run there. That is always, I'm not going to say always, it's my preference more often than it's not, situationally, and typically the Cardinals don't do it. They're typically trying to cut down the run at the plate, and it can also often lead to bigger innings. This time they didn't. I liked the way that it was handled. You gave up the run, but you were able to get Lynn out of the inning without too much damage. You're tied. You're not trailing in the game. It could have been a lot worse had you tried to get overly aggressive. And I think that's maybe just Ollie Marmol reading the moment. Maybe it's the matchups that they were playing, believing like, look, if we bring the infield in, there's a chance they'll squirt one through. You never know exactly what the Cardinals were looking at in that exact moment. But I liked just playing it straight up, getting the out at first, and living to fight another day, especially after you've had some moments where, all right, Mason Wynn tried to make the spectacular play. It's the only reason the inning is still going. Don't put the pitcher in a position to where now he's got his psyche impacted because you brought the infield in, and then it was another ball that he feels like should have been an out if the fielders were back more, but it gets through. Like, you want to try to be a little bit proactive, and with Lance Lynn, we know he can wear his emotions on his sleeve. I thought they handled it well by just taking the out and getting out of the inning with a 2-2 score. Burleson, of course, had his home run that allowed the Cardinals to go back up by 2. But then the 5th inning came around, and we know that bunts against Lance Lynn pisses him off more than anything. But you know what? They are part of the game. Bunting is a part of baseball. And if it's me, it would be a concerted effort of my team to bunt on Lynn anytime that you can, because of the very public history he has of telling people what he thinks about it when you bunt. And if you can find a way to get him off his game, I kind of think more power to you. Like, this is just me speaking objectively. As a Cardinal fan, y'all probably hated seeing it, but like, Lance Lynn doesn't like to field bunts, and he just generally doesn't respect you for bunting against him. That's just been the way that he has been, and that's how he thinks about it, and that's perfectly fine. And you know what? It's really, really cool when they bunt against him and it pisses him off, and then he strikes out the side because it kind of motivates him, but it can also work the other way too, and it did tonight in the 5th inning. Lynn and the Cardinals unraveled a little bit there on consecutive bunts, as one was, it was not a good bunt right to Lance Lynn, but it went through the wickets. I don't know if that's intentional to try to make him field it. That would have to be the scouting report on believing that Lance Lynn would be that poor at fielding the bunt in that spot would have to be pretty, that's bold. I think it was just a bad bunt that worked out in the favor of Philly, because if you deaden it, or if you poke it toward the first base line, which is maybe he was trying to bunt it past the pitcher into the hole between first and second, but maybe gets it right to him. I don't know. You'd have to ask the player what he was trying to do in that spot. I think that one was Stubbs. I'd have to go back and check the box score on it, but that's the way it starts. Yeah, it's an error by Lynn on the Stubbs bunt, and then Rojas says, all right, I'll do it too, and Ivan Herrera makes an error. Throwing error to first base, Paul Goldschmidt leaps to be able to catch the ball, but it sailed on him and wasn't going to be able to get that out. So 2 bunts later, you've got a couple of guys on base to begin the 5th inning, and you figure that Lance Lynn's probably fuming, and I get it, but just got to bear down, try to make it happen. He wasn't able to. Couple of base hits to Schwarber and Bryson Stott consecutively, and that was all she wrote for Lance Lynn, as the game is now tied. Matthew Liberatore coming into a situation where the game could be lost right here, essentially. With the part of the lineup that's coming up, and credit to Ollie Marmol for the quick hook, I think, because you just don't want Bryce Harper facing Lance Lynn, who already maybe feels a little bit aggrieved in that inning. And tonight just has not been going his way in terms of the errors. Didn't give up an earned run. Lynn finished the night with 4 innings, technically 4+ innings pitched because he faced batters in the fifth, but did not give up any earned runs, just 4 unearned runs in the game. But that's a spot in the fifth inning. Pitch count is getting a little bit elevated there. 78 pitches, I believe, Lance Lynn landed on. Not too crazy, but you're talking about an inning that just was not going his way, and you've got the lefty coming up in Bryce Harper, and it's going to be Matthew Liberatore time in that moment, I think, 10 times out of 10. I like the call from Ollie Marmol on the quick hook. Obviously, I feel like Cardinals fans are feeling it now, even if you weren't feeling it in the moment. And I just don't know how you could not have been feeling it in the moment, watching the way that inning was unfolding, and it just felt like a house of cards ready to tumble. Like I said, you got still a situation where after the Stott base hit, 2 runners are on, nobody out. Liberatore comes in, the best hitter on this team is who he's facing. Strikes out Bryce Harper, gets Alec Boehm to fly out. They don't care about Bryson Stott stealing to the second base for the second time after that. Strikeout of Brandon Marsh, and boom, you're out of the jam and in this ballgame still, which, like, you give up one in the gap, suddenly it's 6-4 and things start to spiral, or you walk somebody and you give up a bomb. That could have been the moment where this game was lost, and Matthew Liberatore essentially said, I'm not going to let it happen. He pitched really well, did his job, came up in his spot, a very high leverage situation, even though it's only happening in the fifth inning. That's what high leverage is all about. That is the moment where that game could have turned on the Cardinals, and Libby didn't let it happen. He was throwing 95, feeding heaters up there, sinkers, and just looking really sharp. That was his lone inning of work. He had 2 strikeouts in the frame. No hits, no walks allowed, and the ERA down now for Libby to 4.85. We know it's much better than that, specifically when he's been out of the bullpen. Really nice job by Liberatore keeping things where they were. Fernandez pitched a little later on. Couple of hits allowed, put him into some danger in the 6th. Jojo Romero, first time we saw him all weekend, and it was nice to get to see him thrive and have a good game against his former team, because we did get to see the other side of the trade. Edmundo Sosa hit the light tower home run earlier in the series, and it was nice to see Jojo out there against the Phillies so that everybody could know, hey, look, Cardinals didn't really lose that trade. Both sides have done well. Edmundo Sosa's filled in nicely for the injured Trey Turner, and Jojo Romero is one of the most important pieces of a pretty good Cardinal bullpen. He gets 4 outs, so an inning and a third, couple of strikeouts. ERA is down to 1.24 for Jojo, and he's the one of the triumvirate who really hasn't gotten got so far. Like Kittredge had an inning that was a little bit adventurous, couple of hits given up, had a strikeout, but got a scoreless 7th for the Cardinals tonight. 3.00 is his ERA, though, and we know Helsley has had a couple of hiccups, and his ERA is at 2.42. So at 1.24, Romero is the one that has not gotten got, and man, did he pitch well tonight for the Cardinals, getting the team out of the jam in the 6th inning and then throwing a scoreless 7th as well. How about that Philly bullpen, though? My goodness. Matt Strom's got a .75 ERA. Kerkering is at 1.33. Jeff Hoffman, 1.05. And then Alvarado and Soto are some of their leverage guys that, you know, they're not quite as elite performing as the middle relievers, technically. I know Hoffman's been used in the 9th at times, but that's part of what makes Philly so dangerous, too, is they've got 3 guys that have a 1 ERA, effectively, and they all pitched well tonight as well, which is why this game ended up going into extras. We talked about Mason Wynn in the 9th, not quite able to steer that non-home run toward the fair side of the foul pole in left field, and they had to face a really tough middle relief group, did the Cardinals, in the latter innings in this one, so you end up going to extras. And by the way, let me double back, because I'm always stream of consciousness. I did want to talk a little bit further about the bunt situation, just to mention that it started to kind of rain at that moment, and so if the ball is a little bit wet to field and pick up off the wet grass and be able to fire to first, I think that may have influenced the Phillies doing what they did there, forcing the issue a little bit more on Lynn and Herrera. Not 100% sure if that impacted Lynn, and because he just let the ball go right through him and didn't field it. Herrera sailed the throw. But just another element that I did want to make sure to mention, because I think that could have played a part in it. Lynn pitched well. I mean, outside of the errors, he really did, but the errors came at some brutal times, and he didn't respond too well to cover them up. So I'm not knocking Lynn necessarily. I'm just crediting Ollie Marmol for, even though he was not even to 80 on pitch count, recognizing that the moment that they went to Libby was the one that was going to give them the best chance to win this game, and ultimately it did. We saw some good bullpen efforts from both sides until you get into extras, and the Cardinals are able to take it. Let's talk about Nolan Gorman's night. The homer we obviously mentioned, but the Cardinals coming into that spot were 0 for in the game with runners in scoring position. The way I know that is they ended the game 1 for 8 with runners in scoring position, and Nolan Gorman coming through with a base hit over the second baseman with a runner on third there in the 10th inning. Mason Wynn trots around to score, and everybody can kind of exhale a little bit. It would have felt really brutal to not get that run home, and then to know that Ryan Helsley was coming into the game, regardless of score. He was the guy they were warming up, and if Ryan Helsley comes out there, man on second, not a lot of confidence in his fastball, you could just see how that could have maybe gone off the rails. But the run scores, the run you're supposed to score ends up coming around. Mason Wynn, by the way, scored 3 of the Cardinals' 5 runs in this game. You get what you need there from Nolan Gorman, and really good to see as he has come around. His OPS is up to 767 now, just a couple points shy of where Mason Wynn is at 774. Burley's at 720. But it's really interesting to look at this Cardinal lineup, and those are the only guys tonight that were above 700. Goldie's at 657. Arenado's at 685. He had a 2 for 4 game, though, with a walk. So good night for Arenado. But it's just the base hit singles right now for Arenado. Want to see more of the power that he displayed earlier in the series. But nevertheless, it's just a lineup that, on paper, Carpenter sub 600 OPS, Herrera 673, Carlson's at 368. We know Ciani's been hitting in the 500s on the OPS counter. And then across the way, you've got Schwarber 770, Harper 898, and he was well above 900 before Bryce Harper went 0 for 5 tonight with 3 Ks. Bohm is at 840. They've got some heavy hitters in the top half of that lineup. Marsh is at 770, and Bryson Stott is at 712. So the first 5 guys in that Philly lineup mean business. Castellanos is kind of struggling on the year, but you know that that's not a guy you want to face. Certainly not if there's been a notable world event in recent days. You just don't want to mess around with that guy. He had a couple of hits tonight. But it's just like on paper, the bottom of the lineup for Philly tonight, not strong. Merrifield, Stubbs, and Rojas are all they all kind of look like the bottom of the Cardinal order in terms of their numbers. But it's just that's a mismatch, and it tells you why coming into this series, yeah, it would have been nice to see the Cardinals win it. But it also, I think you can just relax a little bit to know that you didn't get swept. Win a game, somehow end up in a playoff spot after all is said and done because the teams around you are, not playing well, clearly, for the Cardinals to lose 2 of 3 and gain in the playoff conversation. But that's exactly where you needed to be, and it wouldn't have happened if not for Nolan Gorman. So I would say of all the guys that have come around, a number of weeks ago on Hot Take Central, Cam Jansen asked me, biggest disappointment for the Cardinals so far this season, and I thought about it a little bit. Could have gone Goldie, but I said Gorman because I really thought that Gorman was a guy that was going to take a step forward this year, and for a while it looked like he had done the opposite with a monstrous step backward. But now you look at Gorman over the past 15 games, 308 average, 379 on base, and he's slugging 692, 6 homers in his last 15 games, and it's more of a recent production in terms of the power numbers because over his last 30 games, he's got 7 homers. So 15 games, he hit 1 total homer, and then in the subsequent, more recent 15, he hit 6. So he's really started to come alive. Again, 15 games, 14 RBIs over his past 15 games. The prior 15, he had 4. So it's really been over the last couple of weeks or so that Nolan Gorman has truly ascended to where we're seeing him now. He's still striking out a ton. He's got a 50% strikeout rate over the last couple of weeks. That's maybe not exactly the way you quantify it because he's 52 at-bats, 26 strikeouts is 50%, but he's also got some plate appearances that are walks, so maybe not quite 50%, but still a very, very high strikeout rate. It doesn't matter, though, if he's counteracting it with homers. He can strike out 225 times if he wants to, if he's going to hit 6 homers every 15 games. I mean, that's 60 a year. That's 65 a year. So as long as you're getting the good with the bad, with Nolan Gorman, I'm telling you at the end of the day, it's going to be enough. Now, the one worry with that would be, well, what if you're up in a situation in the 10th inning when they've advanced the base runner to third, but there are 2 outs, and it's up to you to not necessarily have to hit the ball over the wall. You just have to drive one through the infield and get a base knock. For him to do it tonight is a really, really nice sign, because it has been largely power or nothing for Nolan Gorman in recent weeks, and I mean really all year, right? Like, strikeouts are high for him. We get it. He's that type of player. But now that you're hitting the home runs, you can live with that in most moments of a game. But in the 10th inning, you just need to be able to put bat to ball and get a hit. And that's not really what you would describe as his skill set coming in. But 0 for 7 is a team with risk. Not after Nolan Gorman got done with them. Base hit, drives in, win. Cardinals take the lead. Now you know you've got a little bit more room to breathe with Helsley, but it also kind of feels like, they might score their ghost runner. They're going to score that one, and we might be going to an 11th inning, is the way it can feel at times when very first batter advances Bryce Harper, who was the ghost runner, to third base, the Manfred man. He's not a ghost. Fly ball advances Bryce Harper to third, and now to have him on third with only 1 out, whereas I think the Cardinals didn't get the advancement until 2 outs, so you weren't able to do anything really creative there. That basically means you're going to have to find a way to get a strikeout somewhere along the way, is how it typically feels in those moments. And Ryan Helsley said, yep, that works for me. I'm up to the task. And what was amazing about it is that Helsley was able to get the back-to-back strikeouts of Pache and Castellanos without really using his fastball much. 11 pitches thrown on the night for Helsley in that 10th inning, ends it with 2 strikeouts, and we only saw 2 four-seam fastballs from Helsley in this game. The other 9 pitches that he threw, according to the StatCast data on it, were all sliders. And boy, was it ever a nasty slider by Ryan Helsley. The one to get Castellanos to end the game was just stupid. Below the zone, exactly where you want it, just drops off the table. But he's throwing, he pumps the slider in at 91, so it's just a completely different, it's just a different kind of pitch. It's a different experience for the batter in there if he's ending it on a 91.7 mile per hour slider. And he'll vary the speeds on it. The slider in that inning was anywhere from 86 to 88 to 89, and then he pumped it up and broke it off. That's one of the best pitches that Ryan Helsley has thrown all season. The slider at 91.7 to end it against Castellanos. I wonder if that's one of the hardest sliders that he has thrown all season. Wonder if that's some information that I would be able to track down, because, again, it was the hardest slider that he threw on the night, according to StatCast, and he threw 9 of them in that inning. Didn't see a curveball. He went fastball to open things up against Bohm. 1 pitch, 1 out, but 98 was all you got out of that fastball. He threw a fastball to Castellanos to basically, I think, just show him one. It wasn't particularly close. 101.4, so he got up the velocity. He just doesn't seem to have right now, Ryan Helsley, a lot of confidence in how that fastball is feeling. And the reason I know that is I looked at the data. Last year, he threw a fastball 56% of the time. That was the breakdown for him, and the slider was much lesser. It was a fastball dominant guy. He goes up there and throws 100, and that's how he gets most of his outs. And then just when you're trying to sit on that 101, 103, he's gonna rip off a slider or maybe drop a curveball just to give you something else to look at. It's largely going to be the fastball. This year, it's lower at 46% of the time, but that's still a pretty high number compared to 2 out of 11 thrown tonight. So you figure if he's down to 46% of the time throwing a fastball this year, that decline has probably largely happened in just the last handful of appearances. I know it was the similar ratio the last time he pitched, and it got even more stark in this one. 9 out of 11 pitches were sliders, 2 fastballs. He's just not confident in it, but was able to dominate with the slider tonight, which is what was remarkable to me. He's had this run over the past 4 or 5 outings. I'd have to dial in on the game log to tell you exactly how long it's been, but it started seemingly in that series against Chicago back last weekend. He has just not have as much confidence in the fastball, and maybe he was tipping it in the Chicago series. The Cubs batters certainly seemed to be on top of it, whether they knew it was coming or whether they were just timing it up really well. That was an area that you go, okay, got away with it because the Cardinals won those 2 games. He got those saves, but he gave up earned runs in both of them, and then he gave up an earned run as well in the game against the Reds earlier this week. So that's 3 in a row, and now you come in tonight after a number of days off, and you don't exactly know what the feel for that fastball is going to be. Started off with it, threw it the first pitch of the outing, and got an out with it, but maybe a little too close for comfort as he gives up a fly ball on the first pitch with it at 98. You go, okay, that's, fresh into the game, but that's hard for a lot of people. But for Helsley, you want to see 99, 100 typically, and then at times, of course, he'll ramp it up to 101, maybe as high as 103. But I think with the confidence in that pitch just not being there the way you normally have had it for Ryan Helsley, and I do think that it's not velocity related. It's more about command, and he's just kind of been all over the place with the fastball. But when that's not there, it's tougher to get outs, especially against a lineup this good, especially when you put a guy on second base to begin his outing that he didn't put there. It's not his fault. That's just the rules of baseball under Rob Manfred now. You've got an automatic runner on second base to begin the inning. Cardinals scored their Manfred man. You're trying to keep Philadelphia's guy out there to be stranded. Ryan Helsley does it. Did it largely with sliders. The fact that he's been able to get away with this period of time where he's not feeling his fastball, hopefully it's not something that happens indefinitely. Hopefully it doesn't linger too long. But these are things that happen. Relief pitchers are human, and they're going to have times where their stuff is not as sharp, even the best in the world. And Ryan Helsley is one of the best in the world as a closer. He's still going through it a little bit, to my recollection, just based on the fact that he didn't throw the fastball very much tonight. I think when he's really feeling that pitch again, you'll know it because he'll be using it about half the time as he has done historically in this role. But those are my thoughts about this Cardinals win. It's a big one. 5-4 in 10, making sure to avoid the sweep. We know sweeps are hard, and the Cardinals proved that tonight by just being able to grind out this game. They didn't play a perfect game. They made 3 errors. They made some misplays. They had a rough time with runners in scoring position, and yet they found a way to win against a team that very well may be the best team in baseball. So how are you feeling, Cardinals fans? Are you basically satisfied with the Cardinals' ability to come away from this series at least getting one? You get you one, and you go to Houston, and you try to beat up on a team that's been down and out about the way they've been playing baseball this year, even though they've got a lot of talent. My opinion is going to have to be a slugfest type of series for the Cardinals to go down there and try to take at least 2 of 3, because Houston has not played well, but they do still have a nice lineup, and largely what has been the Astros' problem has been figuring out the consistency with their pitching. But I did see Hunter Brown had a nice start and has been sort of on the up, and they've got Justin Verlander back now too. So that it may not be applicable anymore that you could say, oh, the Astros are struggling in their rotation. Verlander's going to start the game tomorrow on Monday, and then it's Palante on Tuesday. Kyle Gibson Monday for the Cardinals. Palante on Tuesday gets another chance. He's taking on Spencer Arrighetti. Every time I look at his name, I see Spaghetti, especially if it's just an S Arrighetti. There's no way I'm not calling him Spaghetti. But he's one of the guys that they're trying to figure out if they've got a viable 5th starter on their hands or not. He's got an ERA close to 6. And then it's Michaelis on Wednesday against Raniel Blanco, who's been very good. He had the no-hitter earlier this season as a 2.44 ERA. So we'll see what the Cardinals are able to do, but that notion of, yeah, you can get the Astros right now because their pitching is bad. Well, 2 of the 3 starters the Cardinals are going to see in this series have been really good or historically are really good. In the case of Verlander, you know what you're going to get from him. So can the Cardinals kind of chalk up that battle of 5th starters on Tuesday with Palante versus Spaghetti and say, hey, you get that one and you find a way to steal one of the other ones? Maybe the Cardinals can grab 2 of 3 and come home with a 500 record and an opportunity to really build a cushion, build a nest egg as they take on the Rockies for 4 and the Pirates for 3. Those are teams that the Cardinals should, ideally be able to do some damage against. But that's going to do it for this edition of the show. Appreciate you guys, as always, for listening. Make sure you subscribe to the channel, hit like on the video, and comment below with your thoughts on the Cardinals as they are now in a playoff spot. We didn't spend a ton of time referencing the playoff spot other than to make sure you guys know the information, simply because there's a long way to go and a lot of baseball yet to be played. But it is kind of cool. You have to admit, the Cardinals, for all the trouble they've had, season ended today, well, they'd be in the playoffs. That will do it for this show. Appreciate you guys as always, and we'll talk to you next time on B-Schaeff Daily. Peace.